Welcome to the Expansionist Podcast with Shelley Shepard and Heather Drake. In each episode, we dive deep into conversations that challenge conventional thinking, amplify diverse voices, and foster a community grounded in wisdom, spirit, and love.
Good afternoon, Heather Drake. Great to see you.
Good afternoon, Shelley Shepard. I'm so grateful to be here. And we have a wonderful guest today, so we're really excited to have a conversation.
Yeah, I want to introduce the Reverend Lori Brock before we get started here on the podcast. The Reverend Lori Brock is the author of Souvenirs of the Holy, Where God Hides Holiness. Fascinating discussion for us today. Hiding holiness. Also, Horses Speak of God and God, Grace, and Horses, as well as a contributor to over a dozen anthologies and devotional books. As the rector of St. Michael's Episcopal Church in Lexington, Kentucky, Laurie remains connected to the day-to-day lives of the faithful. She is a frequent contributor to books and online spirituality resources, as well as a speaker at local national events about faith. Laurie graduated from the University of Southern Mississippi, obtained her law degree at the University of Alabama, and received her Master's of Divinity from the General Theological Seminary in New York City. Since ordination, she has served churches in Mobile, Alabama, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Laurie lives in Lexington, Kentucky, and is a competitive equestrian with American Saddlebreds, training at Wingswept Farm. She is engaged to Steve Pankey. Did I say that right?
Pankey. Yeah.
Also an Episcopal priest and Alabama fan. So welcome to the Expansionist Podcast. It's great to have you with us today, Laurie.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
We're here to talk about your book, and it seems like we can talk about lots of other things too. It's the beginning of the season of Advent, and we have connection there, and we're three women in ministry who are talking about what it means to live embodied in our faith and also practice expansive theology, for us to be able to invite the Spirit to allow us to reimagine and for us to connect not only with ourselves, but with the goodness of God that is all over. And so we started a conversation right before in like a pre-show, and I didn't want to pass it up, and I wanted everyone to talk about it because as a priest, as a woman who's a priest, I asked a question like, what little girl says, when I grow up, I want to be a priest? And your answer was, that didn't happen to me. And so let's talk about, how does somebody who grows up maybe not seeing a woman in a priesthood decide as an adult that I hear the call, that is the vocation for me?
And not only not seeing a woman as a priesthood, growing up in a tradition where women were not allowed to be, I call it authorized leaders of the church, because women, even when women are not ordained, they're still leading in the church.
Yes.
But right. I grew up in a tradition where women, were not authorized leaders. So they couldn't be pastors. They couldn't preach. They could, but they taught Sunday school and they did all of that other amazing work that is so necessary. So I grew up in that tradition. When I went to college, I took the spiritual but not religious route, which for me meant I just didn't go to church on Sundays because I was sleeping in because I was in college. And then I went to law school at Alabama and had some very good friends of mine talk about the Episcopal Church to me, to say, we think you would really like it. And Canterbury Chapel in Tuscaloosa is where I went and became Episcopalian there. I love the fact that I asked the priest on one of my first 2 or 3 visits there at a coffee hour about, what does the Bible say about Satan? And Father Woodson said, well, we're not really sure about that. And I thought, I've never heard a church have the courage to say, we don't know. And my last year of law school, Father Woodson asked me, had I ever considered being a priest? And I absolutely said no, because I had grown up in a tradition that just was not an option. And so I think how people begin to envision themselves in an embodiment that they didn't grow up with is that somebody makes the suggestion. And I think that when that happens, when it is uttered into the world, then the Holy Spirit sort of says, okay, let's let it take root. And about 3 years into practicing law, I remember, still involved in the Episcopal Church, I remember just talking casually to another priest in my current church then about, oh, my priest when I was in law school said this, and this other priest said, well, I think that's a conversation worth having. And I would say the rest is history. I mean, I went through. We have a pretty standardized process in the Episcopal Church. So I didn't just say like, I'm going to be a priest and then I was ordained the next day. You have to be interviewed by people and sort of test the call kind of language. And I remember thinking really that the end of this call was going to be no. And the doors just kept opening. And that's always to me a wonderful image of following the path of God is, when we keep walking and the door eventually opens to walk through it and then continuing to walk until we meet a door that's finally closed. And then that's where we get to rest for a while or stop for a while. And the doors continue to be open. So I finally actually believed I was called to be a priest the summer after my first year of seminary. So I think like my whole first year of seminary, still kind of believing, well, yeah, I think they kind of got this wrong. And I don't know. So, and, I had a moment with a woman when I was doing an internship as a chaplain in the hospital. And I just remember thinking like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. Now what's amazing is at St. Michael's, because I've been there 15 years, I have young children who've grown up and their parents will be like, now that they had, I had some parishioners went to vacation and they went to an Episcopal church. And both of the priests were men, and their 7-year-old daughter looked at their parents and were like, why are there men as priests? Like, it was just so representation matters. And I cannot stress that enough in churches. Like, it matters that women are in leadership position. It matters that women are on committees that make decisions, because those 6-year-old girls see that. And the world is hard enough. Don't give them toxic sexism to undo in the church. They're going to see it enough. Let them see themselves embodied in those leadership, because I had to undo that. I mean, I had to completely undo that.
And what a process that is to unravel.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah. The work of the Holy Spirit is never ending with that.
Never. And it's a lot, it's a lot of work. And so, Steve, who's my fiance, he's a white male, he grew up sort of in high school, kind of knowing he wanted to be a priest, and that call was affirmed. He grew up in the Episcopal Church too. But I mean, it was just, we've talked sometimes about how different our experiences were and still are in the church because of our gender differences.
And what a beautiful time to converge around Advent, too. Speaking about gender differences and how, as women, we approach a season of darkness and a season of waiting and a season of practicing the holy. One of the things that I noticed in the book that Shelley had mentioned earlier, in Souvenirs of the Holy, was reframing or reevaluating things that were maybe in some classifications would be considered ordinary, for you to be able to look at that and go, oh, wait a second, this is a sacred marker. This is something holy. And what does it take, or what can a person practice in order to allow their vision to be able to see these things? Is there a filter that we can put on?
I don't know that there's a filter. The impetus for the book was, I had a parishioner come to me and they had been to the Holy Land and brought back, some icons and things and said, oh, I'd love for you to bless these. Great. Bring them after church Sunday, I'll bless them. And I blessed them. And then afterwards they said, oh, I'm so glad that I'm now going to have holy things in my home. And I just thought, I saw expletive. I won't say this so you don't have to leave it, but I thought expletive, the church has messed this up again. Like, we have clearly delineated this line between secular and sacred, as if God is not in everything, as if everything in our lives is not imbued with some presence of God. And it made me angry to think that this wonderful, faithful person thought that the things in their home weren't holy because it didn't have like the face of Jesus on it, or it didn't, it wasn't in the shape of a cross. And I started to just think, well, why have we done that? Now, I think part of why we do that is a power thing. The church historically is a fan of sort of holding on to power. And if we can hold on to power that only certain things are holy, cha-ching, there's a market in that. I also think that the home is a very feminine embodiment of the world. I mean, when you think about historically where women have nurtured and had authority and had power, it's the kitchen, it's the home. And that's, there's shades in there, some problematic, some wonderful. But what does it do to be able to look at a cast iron skillet and know that that cast iron skillet is a holy relic of stories, of your family, of the food that has been cooked in there? What does it do to look at quilts? I'm from the South. No one buys a new quilt. We all inherit our quilts. But to know that that story is a beautiful embodiment of what it means for God to sort of stitch together and remake and reuse things in our lives. Because I think redemption is the greatest miracle of God, quite honestly, that something can be terrible and tragic, and that God and the Holy Spirit can get in our lives and reframe and heal, so that because we grew up in a family where perhaps we were never heard or we were abused, that becomes a quality that God can help us heal into people being really aware of listening or outcasts. So part of it was, I think, being willing to see that there is no such thing as secular, that it is all sacred. When we get to that place, I think then the question becomes, how is this sacred? Instead of, is it sacred? How is it sacred? And different things are sacred in different ways. I mean, I don't care for yard work, so I will probably not find anything holy in a lawnmower. But I know people who love yard work, and my neighbor loves to mow his lawn. And he talks about when he mows his lawn, it is a time that he can pray. And I never considered that until I was talking to him one day. He got a new lawnmower, so he was telling me all about it. And of course, he was using terms I was like, I don't know, turn it on and go. But he liked it because it was an electric lawnmower, so it was a lot quieter. And he said, this just allows me to be present to pray. And I think as I care for this lawn, as I care for the land and this space that his grandchildren play in, that I am tending this garden, and I pray about the people who play on it. It was like, wow. I mean, so I don't know that it's a skill to develop as much as a recognition of, oh, it's all sacred. And what is sacred? How can this object talk to me about an aspect of God?
Can we go there? In the book, you talk about listening to objects, and you encourage the readers to let the objects testify to an object's story. What does the practice of listening to an object's story actually look like in a mindful, sort of spiritual way? And how can we know if we're listening to truth or just projecting our own feeling onto it?
I'm not sure projecting our own feeling onto it isn't truth in its own way. I think if I have an object that I am listening to, part of what I would say is, what is the object you're paying attention to, and what is its history? So I would sort of almost tell people to start with what seems secular. What's its history? Was this your mother's? Was this a parent's?
And we're not talking about crosses or
we could, but I would say
religious symbols. Yeah. We're actually talking about a skillet or shears or pruning tools, or you're talking about something ordinary here, right? So we're not. No, so just for the listening audience, we're we're not talking about our stack of sacred texts sitting on the desk. Like how do you listen to what the quilt is speaking? How do you listen to what those ordinary tools are trying to say in a spiritual way?
When I started working on the book, I would find something, and a lot of times it wasn't a cognitive, like, oh, I'm going to go find a thing and write a chapter about it. But I remember thinking, sitting in a room and thinking, if I could only pick up 3 things out of this room and save them forever, hurricanes coming. I grew up, I lived in hurricane, so in fact, what 3 things would I get, and why would I get them? And that almost always got me into a place where I could think about the emotions that were attached to those things, the stories that I remembered, and were there steps into maybe the biblical or saint stories in the world that I could think about. And so, I think about what are the 3 things, and that's a place to start, to walk into your room, because we all have stuff that we don't necessarily find an attachment to. I'm sitting here at my desk, and I don't necessarily have a profound attachment to the roll of Scotch tape that's on this desk. I could probably work with it, but if I knew that I had to get out of this house in 10 minutes and I could take 3 things, I will not pick that roll of Scotch tape up. But I will definitely pick up, my grandmother's cast iron skillet. That would go with me, because it just, it has such a story in it. So I think part of it to me is, what are the meaningful things to you? I know that we're in Advent, and a lot of my clergy siblings are going to be like, oh, don't put your Christmas tree up. I'm like, look, life is hard enough. If you want to decorate your house at Thanksgiving, you do you. But what happens as you're putting up the ornaments on your tree? If you let that ornament tell you the story, and part of that is that you have to tell the story. So if you are having to explain that ornament to somebody, why you have this ornament, and sometimes that explanation is going to be, I needed some green balls to hang on the tree, or some red ones. But my guess is most of us have ornaments that when we put on those trees, there's a story behind it. Maybe you got this when you were on vacation, with your parents, and it was the last time you were on vacation with your parents before your father died. And there's that story. What does that ornament tell? What are the markers of how you remember getting it? How has it been present in your life? What emotions does it bring up? And I will always tell people, stay with that emotion. We are so quick in our culture to go into our head with logic. Let that emotion stay there. I think some of the most important testimonies that objects give to us are the emotions we don't want to feel. The grief, the disappointment, the heartbreak. It's so much easier, I think, to offload those onto things than it is to carry them in our souls, because those are hard emotions to carry.
I noticed, throughout the book, that you name holy places aren't necessarily geographical. Mm-hmm. And in what you had just said, that there is a place of joy, longing, or grief, and the practice of naming these places as holy and receiving that as the gift. For those of us who are learning to expand our theological or our spiritual imaginations, how would you recommend that we cultivate that, to have a life spacious enough to name or to be aware of a threshold when it appears?
I find those thresholds when I get really mad and aggravated. It's usually when I'm just tell us
more.
When I get into a place where I feel like I'm stuck, and it's kind of one of those things I almost can't explain, but I feel like there's just there's this decision that I want to make, but I can't make it, or there's this thing that I need to have happen, and it's nothing is moving, nothing is going the way I want it to. I feel emotionally, it feels like wearing a pair of jeans. It's just a little bit too tight. Every person knows them, and your immediate response to that is I have to do something. Like, oh, these jeans are too tight. I need to lose 10 pounds. No. Sometimes something is too tight because it doesn't fit anymore because you have changed. And it takes time to sit in that discomfort.
We want to pause and take a moment and let you know how glad we are that you've joined us. If you're enjoying this podcast, consider sharing it with a friend. And if you found the conversation intriguing and want to know more about what we're learning or how you can join our online community, visit our website at expansionisttheology.com.
I think one of the great lies that modern religion has said is that faith is always comfortable. And I think the really important places of faith are the discomfort places, the places we want to get out of. And that's when I think God says, stop and feel what's going on. Maybe you feel stuck. Maybe you feel angry. My therapist loves to say anger is always a positive emotion because it will either get you to grief or it will get you to the power that you needed to find in yourself. And women, how many of us were raised with no one likes an angry woman? Anger is a holy emotion. And I think when I feel that is a moment for me to stop and say, this space is a holy space. It feels uncomfortable. I don't want to be here. My jeans are too tight. Usually my bra doesn't feel good. I mean, there's any number of things that are annoying. And yet that's when I know God is like, stop. Stop trying to go forward. Stop trying to go backwards. Stop and feel what you need to feel. And remember that God is with me in that space. And there's not a good way out of it. I will say that. Like I always say that you sort of find yourself like, oh, I think I can breathe today. But it's just a hard place to be. But that's when I have to stop and really pay attention to being on holy ground. That's a holy space. It is, I think, when we're in Advent, we are waiting. Imagine this as women in our minds. Mary is in literally her last month of being pregnant. My sister, when she was pregnant with all 4 of her children, said that the 9th month she was pregnant, she would tell people that she was in her 737th month of being pregnant. Like she was so tired of it. You're just uncomfortable. You're waiting. Change is coming, but you don't know exactly what that's going to look like. That's where we are in Advent right now. And I think all of us have those moments in our lives when we are waiting for God to birth something into our lives. And that birthing process is going to be messy and holy. And then we're going to have this new thing that we don't really know what to do with. And so we have this new thing. And so it's not, it's not a clean, effortless process. It's a messy process. It's a hard process. It's a painful process. And it is one of the most holy processes and journeys that we make. And I think women have a particular insight into that process because we do that physically with our bodies or can do that.
So Laurie, is this book going to make people angry or holy?
Both, I hope. I do, I hope that what I hope is that people don't read it and go, oh, okay, that's great. I mean, I hope that they go find things in their own life. I hope that they look at the scars on their own body and let the scars tell them something about survival and what it meant to survive. I hope that people become willing to say, it's okay that I don't want this thing in my life anymore. I think that's part of seeing things as holy, is that we also outgrow things. There are things that have told us their story and we're okay with letting that story go, and take it to a place that needs your stuff or that can get rid of it for you. This book is not a get rid of all the stuff, and it's not keep all the stuff. It is maybe be a little more discerning about the things we have in our lives, and the things that need to be functional that we have because we have to mow the lawn, great. And the things that we have that maybe are functional, let them tell what they might have to say about life or where we are in our lives.
I wonder, you mentioned in the pre-show that well, also in your bio that you spend time with horses. Can you share an example of where this ordinary, your day to day as a horse woman, riding, preparing the horse, taking care of the horse, getting the vet there, all the things that go along with it. Can you share one piece of your own ordinary life where the horses, for example, speak to you in holy ways?
I did that in 2 books, so I'm glad to do that. Everything about horses speaks to me in a holy way because that is just where I can most clearly experience God. And that is my thing. I mean, I always tell people, if you're not a horse person, doesn't mean you're not Christian, just means we have different ways. Friends of mine experience that in baseball. That is not me. I loved grooming a horse is one of the things that horses cannot do alone. So if you see horses in the field or horses that are feral, they will always allow a horse that they trust to groom them. Horses are naturally prey animals, which means they're always a little heightened about not being somebody's dinner. So all of that goes to say that when I brush a horse, when I am through riding and I brush a horse and I'm like, it is a time of immense gratitude that this creature has trusted me because we're the alpha predators, but also that they are trusting me to be present with them in a way that they have to have, and they have learned to let their guard down and be vulnerable to be groomed, because a horse can't reach its own withers or its own back end. So all those things because of their size. And it is such a profound reminder to me that existing in this world means we have to be vulnerable, and how hard that is to do. And I get that sermon preached to me every time I ride because, I brush the horse down. I mean, I'm picking up its hooves to pick it, to pick out the dirt from its hooves and its horseshoes. It can't move, it trusts me to do that. I mean, think about that, just that trusting of this animal that has made a decision to do that. I mean, animals have a fair amount of their own mindset. I've ridden enough horses to know some of them are more hard-headed than others. And yet they've decided, you are a person I want to be in community with. And I am always reminded of that. And I think about, I find great satisfaction in cleaning hooves with a hoof pick. And again, this simple tool of metal and plastic is just an embodiment of an act of trust and care, because no hoof, no horse. But in that moment of being able to, and the things I use, hoof picks, brushes, curry combs, when I wash the horse, soap them down, how all of those things are holy tools that God has given to humans so that we can care for these magnificent creatures who put their trust in us, to keep them healthy and whole and shining.
Thank you for that imagery.
You're welcome.
All the horse lovers out there that will listen to this will appreciate not just this the book of the holy, but maybe dig into some of your other writings too. So thank you for that. I have one more question before we close, but I'm going to go to you, Heather. I know you.
No,
you
please,
probably have.
please do it.
Hey.
Well, it doesn't really have much to do with the book, but it has everything to do with being a priest.
Okay.
Let's talk about it. That's important.
Well, I wanted to get your thoughts on this, on the Archbishop of Canterbury, Sarah Mullally. I might not be saying her name accurately. And just your thoughts when you were talking about, girls that grow up not seeing women leaders. And so here we have in our presence an Episcopalian priest, so I feel like I can ask the source about this. The notion that after 400 or 500 years, she's the first woman. When you heard that and you got that news, what was that like for you? And then also this division now that it seems to be causing in the Anglican community a little bit. Like, what are your thoughts on that? If you're able to share that publicly.
Oh, I am. There's a pre-shortage, and I would say there's a pre-shortage, and I'm tenured, so I have all the opinions.
Okay.
I was really shocked. I mean, I was surprised and then not, because I think one of the reasons that she is Archbishop of Canterbury is that she has, and this is going through writing. I've never met her, and I don't know her, but just from things others have said to me about her or news reports, the church has been deplorable. There's just no other word about it. The church has been deplorable about dealing with emotional, sexual, and physical abuse by clergy. And that is not just the Anglican Church,
Yes,
the Roman Catholic Church, all the churches. It has been excused. And I don't think the church should just be a safe place. I think the church should be the safest place.
Amen.
And I speak as a woman who was sexually harassed by my rector for 3 years. And when I would tell the bishop, when I would tell people about it, it was, oh, that's just how he is. Oh, there's really not anything we can do. You need to go get another job and all this. And so what I will say is there was nothing happened to him. And I carried the entire brunt of that. And my story is not unusual. Where God Hides Holiness, which I think is out of print now, but that book is my story of that experience. And when I've had so many women read that book, and I still on regular occasions get emails from women or missed messages on social media who've gone through this. So I think one of the reasons that she is Archbishop is that she was clear about the fact that the church should be one of the safest places. So to the people who have a problem with a woman Archbishop of Canterbury, my question is, where the hell were you when priests were raping children? Where the hell have you been when clergy were taking advantage of women, young women and young men in vulnerable positions? Where were you when the church was abusing and abusing and abusing people? Because if you weren't showing up then, sit down. No one wants to hear your opinions now. That just is, I have no tolerance for, oh, but she has a vagina. You know what? You have let the church abuse women for thousands of years. Don't talk anymore. And
is that the Kentucky fire in you right now, or the Alabama fire?
I'm part redneck, so that's the redneck fire in me. But it's like, oh, she's a woman. We're going to clutch our pearls about it. And I'm like, where was all this pearl clutching when the church was being just horrible to people? I mean, I have people that come to St. Michael's to try church, and they are so surprised that they're at a church that's open and affirming, and they tell me things that have happened to them in church. It just breaks my heart to think there are thousands, if probably not millions of people in the world who are not part of a faith community because they have been so abused, and their abusers were then made bishop or not, and they don't feel safe. And I just, the day that I hear that kind of response to that I have heard to women's ordination, or for that matter, LGBTQ plus full inclusion, then then you can sit at my table and talk. But until then, just don't with me.
Yeah. Good answer.
I love how clear you are. It's just don't with me.
Welcome get
to
out
Advent.
of my sandbox.
I'm sure Mary was saying the same thing. Just don't with me.
I'm just like, what? And I listen to it, and I'm just thinking, like, Well, I'm so glad that you had this much horror when, this, I just don't have anything about tolerance with it. And I think it is at the end of the day, I think that this is what misogyny wrapped up in theology looks like. And
I know you don't have a crystal ball, but will this create a division in the Anglican community?
I mean, that's a good question. I think that part of, I hope it does not. My sense is that if LGBTQ didn't do it, then this won't. Because at the end of the day, if every woman walked out of every faith community in the world,
there would be no practice.
There would just be no church. So I do wonder, about how that really is going to play out. I mean, I do wonder how, all of these bishops and priests that are, scandalized because there's a woman in a position of leadership and servant leadership at that. I mean, I wonder how many women are going to be like, wait a minute. Well, who do you think is going to fix the church potlucks for you? So I wonder what that's going to look like. I really hope it causes women to sit down, to stand up and say, take an assessment of the amazing way that Jesus empowered women, which is my whole other thing is I think I could almost understand it if there were no women in the Bible. But let's be honest, if it weren't for women, we would not have a faith because the men weren't certainly not there on Easter Sunday morning. The men didn't venture into the darkness of a first century graveyard where, as I was saying earlier, there's no perpetual care, there's no artificial light. Graveyards were by and large pretty dangerous places for people to go. And the women went there. The women went there with courage and hope and probably exhausted because they were grieving and crying and worn out, and they went. When a man can do that, talk to me about it. But in my opinion, there should have never been a time when women were excluded from church leadership.
Agreed. Preach.
Yeah. So just
louder.
Could we in our holy imagination and expansionist theology, could we stretch that souvenirs of the holy are actually women ourselves?
Absolutely. And in fact, I very deliberately picked items that were very female focused. Cast iron skillets, quilts. I talk about the women of Gee's Bend and the quilts. Please, if you read the book, go explore Gee's Bend and the women, that artwork there. Garden shears, sort of gardening. Actually got that one weirdly enough from, if you watch The Handmaid's Tale, I know. Yeah.
So scary.
But the fact that she would be in her greenhouse, like that was a place. And I was like, wow, so just the idea of how many things, women are, I mean, all humanity is sort of an embodiment of God's holiness. And I think women are we're always told what's wrong with us. We're too fat, we're too thin, we're too old, we're all these things. We are embodiments of God's love as we are now. Like, wear makeup if you want to, don't wear it. Get your hair dyed, whatever, but love who you are, because it took a woman and God to bring Jesus into the world. Women own that holiness.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for dropping in there when it wasn't really in the book. But I just have been holding that space with her for a while now, since October. But just kind of watching it and seeing these similar places through church history that women have had to step around or, pretend isn't there or is not happening. So thank you for taking us there from your perspective. And I so appreciate your time here today with us, and it's great to meet you. And I just pray that your book is enjoyed by many. So thank you.
I do too. Thank you. I'm so glad to meet with you and discover your podcast and certainly share it. And I do ask if your listeners have read the book or do read the book, if you would go, as much as I'm not a fan of Amazon, it really helps all writers who are writing for smaller presses. It really helps to go leave reviews, even if you say, just really like this book or whatever. So if you've got writers that you love, because those all work into the metrics. And, the reality is, I think some of the best religious writing in our country is not being produced by the big publishing houses.
Sure.
It's being produced by these really wonderful independent presses, these smaller presses, these religious presses, of which Broadleaf is one. And so that is a way that you can support them.
Excellent.
We'll leave links in the show notes for people, so
Thank
they
you.
can. And then, thank you again for your time here. It was wonderful, and for your passion, and for rescheduling with us, and for all the things that had to be done in order for this to happen. Thank you.
Well, I'm so excited. Thank you, and blessed Advent for all who are entering into that season. And just a time then we get to be present to the holy that is going to be born into the world and cause a lot of trouble when it happens.
Yay. Yay. The trouble that will be happening. Yay for the Christ that will come. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Lori. Congratulations on your wedding after Advent, all that stuff. And
thank you so much.
Bless you.
It was our joy to have you listen to our conversation today. If you would like further information or for more content, visit us at expansionisttheology.com.